The world sleeps, unaware of the forces at play. But history whispers its secrets to those who dare to listen. Every great collapse begins with a calm, a lull before the storm. The 1929 Wall Street crash plunged the world into the Great Depression, a period of widespread unemployment and economic despair. According to the Federal Reserve, unemployment in the United States reached a peak of 25%, and over 9,000 banks failed between 1930 and 1933. This devastation created a breeding ground for political extremism as desperate populations sought radical solutions. Germany, for example, was already grappling with the economic and social burdens imposed by the treaties of Versailles. Hyperinflation had made daily life unbearable, and political instability paved the way for Adolf Hitler's rise. Historian Adam Tooze notes that the Nazi Party skillfully exploited economic fears to seize power. World War II, while driven by a mix of territorial ambitions and nationalist ideologies, was undeniably fueled by the desperation wrought by economic collapse. However, the Great Depression wasn't an isolated incident. History shows a recurring pattern, financial turmoil exacerbating existing tensions and contributing to international conflict. Economic hardship and social unrest. After World War I, economic turmoil swept across Europe. Reparations crippled Germany, and widespread unemployment made populations vulnerable to extremist ideologies. Similarly, in Japan, the economic instability of the early 20th century intensified militaristic and expansionist policies, ultimately leading to its involvement in World War II. Competition for scarce resources. Economic downturns heightened the struggle for resources. For example, Japan's aggressive expansion into Manchuria in the 1930s was driven by a need for natural resources to fuel its economy, and military weakened international cooperation. Economic upheavals undermined trust between nations. In the years leading up to both world wars, economic protectionism and collapsing trade agreements deepened distrust between nations, setting the stage for conflict. Words may be meaningless, but one thing that never lies is numbers. Every chart, every report, and every piece of history points in the same direction toward inevitable collapse. When you watch the news, do you ever feel like you're watching a performance? Politicians clashing, heated debates, and dramatic disagreements. It feels real, doesn't it? But ask yourself, why does it always feel like a show? Many journalists and insiders, those who walk the corridors of power, have admitted to an uncomfortable truth. The drama on your screen often ends at the studio door. Behind the scenes, these so-called rivals sit at the same tables, share the same jokes, and often the same goals. Now, I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong with building friendships or having civil discussions, but it begs the question, why the act? Why the spectacle? The answer is simple: public attention. A show gets higher ratings, shapes public opinion, and sells ideology. It creates heroes and villains, a stage for political theatrics that can later justify actions when things inevitably go wrong. These historical patterns are not just relics of the past. Today we see similar trends emerging. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Federal Reserve increased the US money supply by more than 40%, flooding the economy with $4 trillion in new dollars. This created a short-term lifeline but contributed significantly to inflation. In 2022, central banks purchased over 1,136 tons of gold, the most since 1967, signaling growing distrust in fiat currencies. Military spending reached a record $2.24 trillion globally in 2023, reflecting rising geopolitical tensions in regions like Eastern Europe and the South China Sea. As in the past, these economic disruptions are already driving social unrest and geopolitical posturing. Desperate leaders often turn to conflict to rally their populations and stabilize economies. Inflation is often painted as a necessary evil, but its root causes lie in policy decisions. Governments frequently rely on demand suppression, intentionally increasing unemployment to curb spending. When fewer people have money to spend, demand drops, stabilizing prices. It's a strategy that disproportionately hurts the poor and middle class, creating cycles of inequality and suffering. Yet, a major driver of inflation is rarely addressed, which is money printing. During the pandemic, central banks injected trillions into the economy. Think of it like this. If you're selling one egg and 10 people want it, the price skyrockets. But if you suddenly have a dozen eggs, the price drops because supply increases. Money works the same way. The more of it in circulation, the less each dollar is worth, eroding its purchasing power. It's a dangerous game of delay. Governments are playing for time, hoping to prolong stability while knowing full well that upheavals are inevitable. Whether the collapse happens today or tomorrow, the signs are clear. It's coming soon. But does it have to end in conflict? History shows that collaboration, transparency, and sustainable policies can prevent escalation. Political scientists like Noam Chomsky argue that international cooperation and addressing inequality are the true solutions to breaking this cycle. History is a warning, not a prophecy. The question is, will we listen, or will we be the ones who continue to sleep? One more thing, just a reminder. While politicians talk and enjoy their debates, it's always the people who suffer. As we always say, don't believe everything you hear. Question the narratives, do your own research and stay awake. And don't forget to follow us, so together we can reach more people and deliver messages like this to our adventurous friends.